Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Hey everybody, how you doing? I know everybody's probably tired and confused right now, like I am, but we're going to take a little break today from all the madness, and we're going to be talking about a place that has captivated me and so many others for so many years. It's the hilltop village of Rennes-le-Château in southwest France. It is, let me just go to the source, our old prime source, Wikipedia. This is the common story. Rennes-le-Château is a small commune approximately 5 kilometers south of Cuisa in the Aude department in the Languedoc department in southern France. This hilltop village is known internationally and receives tens of thousands of visitors per year, drawn by conspiracy theories surrounding a putative buried treasure discovered by its 19th century priest, Bérenger Saunière, the precise nature of which is disputed among those who credit its existence. And that's so true. We hear stories of the Templar treasure, the treasures of the Temple of Solomon being brought to that area. We hear of heretical documents being discovered in that area that really could change the course of history. We hear about treasures of gold and, and other items. We don't know what the treasure is. People talk about the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, and those kinds of sacred items. We're going to get into that with my guest tonight, who, he's our very own Dr. James Martin. Now, he doesn't like to be called doctor, and I don't call him that when we're just visiting. I call him Jay. So I've got Jay Martin with me, but I'm very proud of him and his accomplishments. So I'm going to tout them, even though he hates it. But anyway, hey, James, how are you? Jay.
I'm very well, yes. Call me Jay. My mother calls me James, yes. And thank you for having me back on again, Renee.
Oh, of course. As I've told the audience, the listeners, that you'll be coming on now and again because you're actually, a part of the Night Vision team. You're my research partner. We've got some great stuff planned for the future. For some really interesting things on KGRA, maybe some specials and things that could be forthcoming in the not too distant future. So I'm really excited about that. But another reason that, actually, it wasn't the reason I decided to have you on today. It just happened to be I invited you on today, and coincidentally, you reminded me that this is the birthday of our dear, dear late friend, Tim Wallace Murphy, who was a prolific author in this genre. And of course, our dear friend and teacher, although he didn't like to be called teacher, sort of like you in that way. He was just really, really somebody that I just really admire, mostly for his thinking, for the way that he thought, for the way that he viewed humanity and society, and for his, wonderful knowledge of European history and the bloodline and all that stuff. It was wonderful to be able to have him as a personal friend, and we really miss him. And I must say, you took really good care of Tim in the last couple of years of his life, providing him a place to live, making sure he had everything that he needed, you and Max. And then, of course, Patrick saw to Tim's daily needs and, actually did most of the hands-on care. Mm-hmm. So you guys actually lived together the last 2 years of Tim's life. So I'm sure there's nothing like living with somebody, to really get to know them. But
yeah, I mean, I'm not going to reveal any of the juicy gossip that he told.
Oh, man.
Joking, of course. No, I was just thinking, it really is appropriate on his birthday to be discussing the mystery of René Le Chateau. I might rename it that. Tim was a remarkable, flawed, perfect, wise, unwise, intelligent friend who essentially became my sort of adopted dad. And there isn't a day that I don't miss him. He was such a part of everyone's life, whether you liked that or not. If he took a liking to you, he had a way with animals. Animals used to just come straight up to him, and I suppose a little bit like an adopted puppy in this way. If Tim liked you, he would always be there in your life. So thank you for dedicating this show to him. I know he'll be up in a cloud having a coffee and a cigarette.
Oh, absolutely.
Smiling down.
He really had a large effect on a lot of people. Doesn't mean that we always agreed, No. Certainly you had disagreements with Tim, and I did too, but that was the good thing. You could disagree and still be best of friends, but you could certainly disagree on opinions. And
it's certainly a lesson for today's world, isn't it?
Oh my gosh.
Disagree with someone, it doesn't mean that, you have to be mortal enemies. I mean, there's a book that Tim asked me to originally to edit, which I started and then started to add to with his consent, of course. And I just thought, I was just having a look through and still adding a few bits and pieces to it, but there was just a quote that really jumped out at me from this as yet unpublished book, and it reads like this: "Sometimes circumstances combine to mask the emergence of truth in a manner that cannot be blamed on bias." And I just thought that it was just
something to chew on.
Something to chew on, certainly for today's world, I think.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Now, this book that you just read from, this is a book, as you mentioned. It's not been published, so I'm assuming this is Tim's last book.
Yeah, effectively. He started it back in 2014 and didn't do too much with it, sort of added to it and all of this. And it was about 2 years later. The topic is something I'm fascinated by, and it's journeys from from Europe, the old world, to the new world before Columbus, so pre-Columbian transatlantic voyages. The reason I don't say that too often is because well, you can hear it on my tongue. It's really difficult to say. But essentially this idea that Columbus wasn't the first to discover the Americas, namely because there were people already there. What we mean to say by that is people from Europe visiting the Americas. And we know that the Vikings were there. And what this book does is have a look at whether or not Romans, Phoenicians, perhaps the Greeks, the Irish, the Welsh visited the Americas before, and disproves or seeks to try and question whether or not some of those groups and many others arrived there. It was a fascinating book that the privilege of editing, just having a look for spelling mistakes and all of this. And within my own field, I don't like discussing my academic background too much. Like I say, I'm just James, but I looked at Norse. I looked at industrial relations, which part of that is economics, which part of that meant I was interested in trade across the North Atlantic by the Norse. So there were a few things that I wanted to add, and with Tim's blessing, said yes. And when he passed, I'll be honest with every listener, I just didn't know what to do with it. So I've continued to add a few things, but this is Tim's work with a few additions from another.
And what's it going to be called? Is that already decided?
Yes, it's called They Did Not Come to Conquer.
Oh. What did they come to do?
Well, originally trade. To trade, to visit. If you look at the Norse, for example, I know this isn't the topic of the show, but if you look at the Norse, they were wanting, that colonized Iceland and Greenland, and they were really looking for sources of things like wood, ivory. I'll not spoil the fun with the ivory. But they were looking for essentially things to trade. I mean, look, the term Viking means to explore. It's a job title. So I'm really bemused when we look in the history books and we see things like, well, the Vikings came along to rape and raid Lindisfarne. It's the equivalent of saying the customer service agent came to destroy Lindisfarne. It's a job title. I'm always bemused by things like that. So that's the book. There's a lot to it. Hopefully, will be published soon. And it's an interesting read. What else can I say?
Wow, I can't wait. And obviously your accent is not French, it's English, but you do live in France and you live in this area, the Aude region that we're talking about. And that's where Tim made his way to in the last several years of his life. And there is something really interesting and special about that area. I mean, not only its stunning beauty and the rich history, but also there's something there that's like an energy that I believe is related to the telluric currents that are so strong there. In fact, the old mayor of Rennes-le-Château, when we were working on Bloodline years and years ago, told us, the secret of Rennes-le-Château is not gold, treasure. The real secret of Rennes-le-Château is the telluric energy. And I thought, that never left my mind, and it's come up over and over again, and I can see how it applies in so many different ways. But it's a wonderful place, and I used to take people on tours there, and I hopefully we'll start doing that again shortly once travel is available. But I would always warn people, I'm warning you, if you go, you will return. You will, once you go there, you always come back.
Well, Tim had a saying about that. He used to call this area the glue pot.
Yeah.
Once you get your feet stuck in the pot, they eventually stick. This area is, it's Disneyland for grown-ups. It's got everything that you could possibly need. Stunning beauty, friendly people. You have practically every culture and civilization has been here. There are flavors as far away from Tibet. For example, at the Cathedral of Elne, named after St. Helena, who was Constantine's mother. So there you've got the Romans, the Greeks founded Marseille, the city of Marseillon. I'm horribly pronouncing that in Greek, but there we go. You have perhaps some Egyptian, but certainly Phoenician steps. You have, the Brits have certainly arrived in number in the past few years. But there is so much history. The Visigoths, even the most ancient parts of our species history. There's some of the cave drawings in the Ariège, for example. The Ariège is about an hour away from Rennes-le-Château if you do come to visit. The cave paintings there are 30,000 years old. it beggars belief. You cannot, when you see some of the paintings there with your own eyes, there is something incredible about that. You know,
About
history is
knowing that you're
literally,
standing there where that person was standing there painting millennia and millennia ago. I agree. There's something very magical about it and awe inspiring. But it's you mentioned the Sufis. That's the other thing. Uh, Around that area, uh, it was a lot of different groups were drawn, and I'm not just talking about different nationalities, but different thinking, different ways of being, different philosophies and religions, and the Celts, the Sufis, obviously, the Christians, the so-called heretics, the Cathars and others that were Christian sects, but ran afoul of the Catholic Church, so they had to be extinguished. But it's amazing. It was sort of not only a glue pot, but a melting pot.
yeah, exactly. This area of France, just to give you an idea where it is, we're in the foothills of the Pyrenees, with some stunning views, as I've already mentioned, and has been a melting pot of ideas and thoughts for thousands of years. There's a old Jewish community who were persecuted in the 1300s. The origin of the Inquisition occurred on this side of the Pyrenees, not in Spain. Not getting into Monty Python, by the way. But in terms of heresy, I mean, yeah. we know about the Cathars, and if you don't know too much about the Cathars in a nutshell, they just believed, they believed in things like reincarnation. They were some of the first vegetarian Christians. They believed in a little bit more
ascetic group, super ascetic. Yeah. They didn't, as you said, they didn't eat meat. They were chaste. They did not have sex. By and large.
Not reproductive sex. No, they didn't.
Right. Once they took the consolamentum ceremony and became what is known as a perfecti or a parfait, they really withdrew from worldly needs and worldly things.
Yeah, ultimately they believed this was hell.
Yeah, this was hell, and it was a very much following a sort of Gnostic tradition.
Mm-hmm. But they certainly weren't the first heresy in this area. I mean, before the Cathars, but the Cathars didn't just suddenly, rock up and say one day, right, we're believing in this. No, what they were part of a richer tradition of heresy just means freedom of thought. You had the Sabellian history, the Sabellian heresy, the adoptionist heresy, the Photinian heresy. I mean, we could carry on for hours about the different so-called heretical thoughts in this area. It is because it's on the trading routes in the Mediterranean. You have overland trading routes going deeper into France and then into Spain. You have, I forgot to mention the Carthaginians, Hannibal with his elephants. It really was a very prosperous area. And with that prosperity came a lot of ideas and thought. And so really you had a very tolerant area. I mean, yes, it was Christian. Yes, there was dogmatic Christianity here, but you had large Jewish ghettos, synagogues. You had some very strange things going on with dancing. Perhaps that's for another show. But you have a lot of different thoughts. You have people who are trading over in the Middle East. The Templars were certainly in this area in great number. They were trading with the Middle East. You had the Phoenicians about 1,000 years before this, who were trading along the coast of the Mediterranean, bringing all sorts. You can see it in this area in the food the music, the culture. You can really see that legacy. Notwithstanding, you can physically see it in some of the ruins and some of the remarkably preserved buildings in this area.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing the things that are actually still there that no one really knows what they are anymore. No one, they're kind of, overgrown and things like that. I'm thinking of the, specifically at the moment about the Moorish castle that you read about in some kind of archival material, and then went out and looked for it and actually found it.
Yeah, no, it was at the side of the road. If you go for a walk in this area, you're likely to find something either very old or certainly very old looking. Trying to piece together how it fits in with the story of this area is one of the great mysteries. You coming back to Rennes-le-Château. If any of your listeners have heard of Rennes-le-Château, they may have heard of the Da Vinci Code, which certainly put Rennes-le-Château on the map if it wasn't already. Various connections with that film. And certainly every year, no, not last year, but certainly every year, people come to Rennes-le-Château to look for either a physical treasure, believing that the treasure of one of the Blanche of Castile, no evidence for that, by the way.
Right.
But the treasures of the Cathars, the Templars, and whomever else, the Huns, the Visigoths, whomever. But they come with a metal detector. But then other people come looking for a deeper treasure, and that really is Tim would call it a pathway of spirituality. They would come looking for some sort of experience, and who am I to say whether they are experiencing something or not? But I've certainly had some unexplainable experiences in this area, and in the area directly around
experiences and answers. You're trying to unravel, mysteries, and so you're looking for clues. I mean, I remember the old story. Sonier, the priest there, was sort of, I kind of get the idea that he was sort of relegated to this, remote hilltop village. Although now I wonder whether he didn't choose it somehow. But anyhow, and he began to do some renovations in the church. He supposedly found some sort of quote unquote treasure, and that he became fabulously wealthy and started making all kinds of improvements in the village, built a water tower, built the roads, and no one could figure out, where all this money was coming from, but there were all these rumors about this treasure. And another part of that story was after Sonier's death, his housekeeper, maid, companion, Marie d'Arnaud, was seen out in the yard there, in the garden, burning. The story went years ago, burning French notes, money, out in the garden. And so we were thinking, well, was it because the currency had changed or, whatever? But I ended up meeting a woman, an old woman from Toulouse, who used to be, she called herself the adopted granddaughter of Marie d'Arnaud. And she used to go and visit Rennes-le-Château and go visit Marie. And so I mentioned that idea about her burning the money in the yard. And she says, oh, no, it wasn't money. She says, I was there. She said, it was documents. And I said, oh, my gosh. I said, don't you wish that you hadn't burned those now? And she goes, oh, no. They were against the church. So, of course, that whet my appetite even more. So obviously something they perceived as heretical, or maybe something that went against church doctrine or history, that revealed something possibly about Jesus, possibly about the crucifixion. Who knows? who knows? It could have been anything, but
Well,
I just thought
it's,
that was very interesting. I had been introduced to the lady by Antoine Captier, whose grandfather was, the bell ringer at the church during the Saunier years. And, he was a big part of that story. And so Antoine took me and my business partner at the time, Bruce Burgess, over to Toulouse to sit and visit with this lady whose name I won't reveal. She's probably not even alive anymore. That was, 10, 15 years ago. And she was, quite old then. But anyway, she showed us some pictures and she showed us some items that she owned, that she had, that belonged to Saunier, some books and journals and things like that. And quite interesting. And she claimed that she had pieces of Visigothic jewelry, which she wouldn't bring out and show us. So, but Antoine showed us a bunch of pictures of it, but still, I haven't seen the actual pieces in person, so I can't say that.
Well, the whole mystery with Rennes le Chateau, I mean, each generation seems to bring its own thoughts. I mean, I just thought, just to really put things straight on the record, Saunier didn't build the water tower. He didn't pave the road. They were done by the municipality, by the local authorities, a little bit after and then.
Well, did he really have money? Oh. Did he really get rich?
Well, he certainly. Here's the mystery. I mean, look, in a nutshell, here we have this impoverished, rundown village by the 1800s. Certainly in the 1850s, 60s, there is a church that previously belonged to a relatively well-off noble family in the area, certainly well known in the area. The priest, Bérenger Saunier, so if you're hearing Saunier and you recognise it from the Da Vinci Code, you can certainly see where the author of the Da Vinci Code, Dan Brown, got his name from. And you have this priest who starts off at the age of 33, living in relative poverty. And certainly, piety might be the other way of explaining this. He had quite a bit of debt. And then all of a sudden, he's spending the equivalent of nearly 3 million euros in today's money, about 690,000 francs at the time. And yet his annual earnings were about 1,000 francs per year. Now, some have suggested he received a lot of money through simony, saying masses. And, he certainly received lots of requests to say mass and took the money for it. But the going rate for masses was around about 1.25 francs per saying, if you know what I mean, which doesn't account for that amount of wealth. No. Now, by all accounts, Saunier was not a pleasant character. I think some of the ideas around the church, and did he choose the church? Well, his dad was a manager for the essentially a manager. I'm not going to go into the full ins and outs, but he basically managed the estates for the lords, the ennobled families that I was just referring to. And Saunier ended up the priest, essentially where Daddy ended up working. I mean, he really did torment quite a lot of the villagers. He completely reconfigured the village. In a way, I'm glad he did that, because there's a superb restaurant at the heart of Rennes le Chateau, the Jardin de Marie. I would definitely recommend it.
Absolutely.
But that Jardin de Marie, the Garden of Mary de Narnaud, was formerly the market square. He just took it over. He was known for his extreme views. He was a staunch monarchist. And there is some idea that he might have been receiving money from a foreign power to support an insurrection. I certainly have a breadth of evidence to bring to the debate, the discussion about Rennes le Chateau, that it could be he committed 2 acts of treason. Perversely talking about this today. But the mystery, and certainly what we do know, is he died in poverty. Now, it could be he died in 1917 after the outbreak of the First World War. If he was receiving money, as it's sometimes alleged by the Austrian or the Habsburg family, then that might explain why he didn't have access to cash. But he was
the Habsburgs definitely were in that area. Franz Joseph came down and spent time in that area, and I actually
gardening techniques from
I had the audacity to reach out to Karl von Habsburg, who's now the head of the Habsburg family. At that time, his father Otto was still alive. But I, posed the question, why did his grandfather go there? And he wrote me back that he was studying irrigation in the area, but he would be very interested to know, how our story came out, and it was just kind of funny that he actually wrote back to me.
You've got these very interesting connections. I mean, here we go. You have this poor parish priest. Try saying that after a few orange juices. You've got this poor parish priest who becomes fabulously wealthy. There is anecdotal evidence that he discovered secret passageways underneath the church.
Right.
Most likely relating to, as I say, that church was in the land. It was the private church of a aristocratic family. The idea that there wouldn't be a crypt or something underneath the church would be more unusual. And given the French Revolution, certainly any crypt, anything of value may have ended up underneath that chapel, and then rediscovered at a later date. The previous priest before the French Revolution, who ended up fleeing from memory over into Spain, just over the Pyrenees, and ended up hiding quite a bit of things. So it's no surprise that Saunière perhaps ended up rediscovering that. But then that's where the mystery, it's not just as simple to say Saunière sold a load of masses or, was getting money from the Habsburgs. We probably won't ever find out where he got his money from, but the wealth, the capital, if I must, in that church, certainly came from lots of very large donations. Saunière's boss for a time was the Bishop of Carcassonne, one Monsignor Billard, and he received, I think, $1.5 million francs at the time, which is staggering amounts, from 2 wealthy heiresses, again, royalists. That might also, they paid for the altar, that kind of thing. They really did. But the mystery around this is when you walk into the church, you're firstly confronted with a demon. Now, whether it's Asmodeus, the destroyer, or the creator, or whatever it is, it's certainly odd. There's a number of very strange symbols.
It's actually the baptismal font is being held up by this really ugly demon, which purports to be Asmodeus, I guess. But that's what I did want to bring up. But before I do, I want to mention to my listeners that you're listening to Night Vision on KGRA, and my guest is James Martin, and we're talking about the mysterious village of Rennes le Chateau. Tonight, our show is dedicated to our dear, dear friend, the late Tim Wallace Murphy. I was just going to bring that up just before you mentioned Asmodeus, that Saunière did redecorate or have the church redecorated in a very, very odd fashion. for one thing, we've got the demon, we've got, the stations of the cross are backward. We've got station 14 showing them at the tomb of Jesus, lifting his body in or out of it, but it's at nighttime and there's a full moon in the sky, which we know that, it was against Jewish law, or beliefs to handle a dead body after sunset. So was he alive? And were they taking him in or taking him out? There's so many things, and I'm sure you know a lot better than I do. But what I wanted to ask you is, have you come to any opinion at all on exactly why he would have done it? I mean, it's really, quite garish in a way, the way the church is decorated. And of course, there are little hidden things, in the stations, in the big mural up on the wall, the Fleury Hill, and all that. There are little sort of hints and clues, or things at least to question. But what do you think his reason was for doing it? Was he trying to tell people something?
I think that, firstly, to answer about this in a roundabout way, the priest that interests me isn't Sonier, it's the priest that came before the revolution, who, we know of Marie de Negre, Darble, who's one of her tombstone, well, if you want to call it that, her stone is riddled with symbology.
Yes.
Very unusual. We've got Blue Apples Day really from some of that symbology. Blue Apples Day is just the day in which, wherever the origin of that comes from. But for Sonier, I mean, to answer it directly,
just to clarify just a little bit, Blue Apples Day is January 17th, and at noontime on January 17th, inside the church at Rennes-le-Chateau, the sun hits the windows in such a way that it reflects, blue. It looks like blue lights on the wall. So they call it the Blue Apples. And there was a reference in some parchments to something about midday blue apples. So that's what we're talking about here, in case you didn't know and you haven't been there. Interestingly, January 17th is coming right up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you go in the church now because of COVID, or?
Yeah, well, certainly during, at the moment, everything is under restriction, but during the summer you could go into the church, and there were strict limits on how many people could go in at one time. There were hand washing stations, but yeah, you can go in.
I know a lot of people, try to make it over there, or try to make it up there on January 17th. I just wondered whether that would be prohibited this year.
If any of your listeners are thinking of planning a trip and want to ask that question, feel free to get in touch with me on Twitter at CPT James Martin. Feel free to ask me that very question. Why did Sonier do what he did?
Yeah.
Well, he was certainly hiding something. The changes to the village, the changes to the church. He operated essentially a hire and fire. So one bit of work would be undertaken, that group was fired, another group come in to carry on. He covered a potential access point to the crypt by creating a so-called secret room that covered the entrance to this. Now, the entrance, it is alleged, it's purported that the entrance to the crypt was by removable floorboards. Quite sensible if you're facing the French Revolution. Sensible anyway if you're wanting to give a family, private family crypt some dignity. Why did he end up changing things? Well, that's part of the mystery. My thoughts, for me, I think he was involved with trying to establish a bloodline back to essentially back to the House of David, which was all the rage during the Victorian period and afterwards. My sense is that the Habsburgs and various other royals have been connected with this area. They were trying to really get some proof for that, and perhaps he had found something like that. I mean,
like genealogies or something, or
it could be genealogies, it could be artifacts, and this too then leads to the real mystery, which is some have alleged demonstrable proof lies in Rennes-le-Château of a bloodline of Jesus. And there is certainly in the area a tradition that Jesus and Mary, actually Jesus didn't die on the cross, he survived and came with his two children, James and Sarah, over to this area. Now, that's anyone's guess, but certainly if that's what he found, that would
and certainly a lot of the locals, just the regular people who have nothing to do with the tourist industry, there's a lot of acceptance of that, and they say, of course, Mary Magdalene was here, and Yesu too, and the children, and they played in the meadow, and I'm going like, oh, it was like just accepted, this idea, and to us at the time, it was just some years ago, it was like a shocking idea to consider. Really amazing. Now, there was a murder that happened during the Saunier time of another priest in the nearby village of Custoza, or however you like to say it, Abbey Gellie. And there seemed to be some connection between the Saunier mystery and that murder in that abbey. I know that, it was very, very odd circumstances. I know he was very paranoid, reported to have been very paranoid, and would never answer his door to anyone except his niece, who would bring him supplies and things. And he was, she had a particular knock. But then, one morning he was found dead, I think with an axe in his chest, in his house. And then one little piece of paper, they said about the size of a cigarette paper, with the words Viva Angelina written on them. And so that, of course, it's been a very big mystery in the area. And some years back, I had our friend Colin Taylor, who's a former homicide inspector from Scotland Yard, look into that and do an actual forensic examination and report on the murder of Abbey Gellie. He came up with some very interesting things, and it seemed to me like there was definitely some culpability by the priest Saunier in that murder. So I'm going to have Colin on and have him go through his report and say what he found. But that's just another strange story that's attached to that Saunier mystery,
And again, the story, when you start looking at Saunier, just very quickly, I thought I'd just mention, a lot of what we know about this story came from Noel Corbu, who ended up owning the villa that Saunier had built, now called the Villa Bethania. It wasn't in Saunier's time. He was a hotelier who was after customers. So there's a lot of the story that is confused by Corbu and his, how can I put it, his commercial activity.
Yes.
And a lot of that.
And of course, Noel Corbu was the father of Claire Captier, who is married to Antoine Captier. So they're all tied up in the story. But yes, I do agree that Noel Corbu was, had some commercial ventures that he was playing up at the time. So
even when you strip away some of the, I mean, Rennes-le-Château has been it's been written about, it's been filmed. Henry Lincoln and his book Holy Blood, Holy Grail really put Rennes-le-Château for the Anglophone community on the map. When we tread carefully with Rennes-le-Château because there is a lot of nonsense and speculation written about it. But if you go back, and it's not too difficult to get access to archival information, or you can leave sad people like me to do that. When you start looking in the archives and have a look at what was going on at and before Sonier's time, there are so many more mysteries. I mean, you've just mentioned the murder of Gély at Custosa. Somehow with all locks locked from the inside, someone managed to get in and axe him. Well, how on earth did that happen? You've got lots of other mysteries in the area. Yeah, and it's not just the heresies. You've got the Templars were in the area, the Cathars. I was up at the castle where Alaric the Goth, who sacked Rome, took all of the prophets and the theft that the Romans had undertaken, including some from the Temple of Jerusalem. And Alaric the Goth's capital was in this immediate vicinity. I can't give you a town name because its capital isn't part of a town. It's just some well-preserved ruins. But there you go. Could it be that something like that from the Second Temple ended up in this area, and that Sonier found? There really is just so much more. And what you find is when you read about Sonier, you then start looking at Henri Boudet, for example, who was the priest over at Rennes-les-Bains, who wrote a very interesting book, again filled with
cryptic
truths, cryptic information. Can it be decoded? Who knows? In a strange way, the treasure of Rennes-le-Château, if it is gold, then I hope no one finds it, because this story reinvents itself frequently.
Yeah.
But the real treasure of Rennes-le-Château is what happened, and what happens in the area.
I've never had so many coincidences or synchronistic things happen anywhere else. It's just it's unbelievable how I can come to town and within 5 minutes I've run into someone that I totally did not expect to see, that I know from God knows where. It could be somebody from America, somebody from Germany, but it's just strange how things actually occur there, and you kind of just get on and ride, or at least I do, just see what happens next.
The previous priest at Rennes-le-Château, I just thought I'd mention this. It's just come into my head. Just talking about mystery, it's not just it's the coincidences. It's the fact that you're rudely interrupted, while you're having a coffee, just by someone who wants to say hello. Mm-hmm. But just something that crossed into my head: the priest, the pre-revolutionary priest, left a very odd note. I haven't any explanation, and it says Jesus the Nazarene is not here, and it says so, or roughly it says that in Old French, and it's repeated 7 times, and this was found within some archives, or allegedly found within archives of Marie de Negre, a heiress and
And what would have been the time that was written?
Off the top of my head, this was in the 1740s, to my memory.
Well, I did mention to you earlier today that I have a dear friend, another researcher, Sandra Hamlet, who a couple years ago sent me a copy of a fragment of a parchment talking about a tomb, and it sounded like they were talking about Jesus and a tomb in Septimania. And, Rennes-le-Château back in the day was part of Septimania.
Yeah.
I mean, there's another area in France that's generally referred to as Septimania today, but this was the old area. It's written in Latin. So I'm going to find it or have Sandy resend it to me, and I want to send it over to you and have you decipher it and tell me for sure what it says.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we can share it with the listeners. Yeah, very interesting stuff. I mean, it's also, hidden and mysterious and very, very interesting. But now you are going to, I know you're near finishing the editing and the extra material that you added to the book. And then there's a matter of getting it published. So we'll be working on that, and hopefully that book will be available, in the not too distant future for people to read. And I know there would be a lot of people that would be interested in having, the last work of Tim Wallace Murphy. And we're so glad that we could dedicate this show to him today on his birthday. Of course, we don't know how old he was because there's a lot of mystery about Tim Wallace Murphy as well.
This is true.
I wouldn't have it any other way.
No, but the thing is with mysteries, we all try and solve them, but the joy of a mystery is them not being solved, because it means you can bring something yourself to the table.
Yeah. I mean, the joy of the mystery is the journey of discovery.
Yeah.
Because it takes you down so many different paths, and there's so many different threads that you can pick up. And I feel like it's almost initiatory, to go through the process of looking for the answers, walking the land if you can at all, and, seeing how it hits you, and the answer could be different for you, I think, than it has to be for someone else, because it may not be completely tangible. I don't believe that it is.
But this is the land of history, like we say, from the Romans onwards and beforehand, the Celts. It's the land of coincidences. So many, it's so much so that I now just shrug my shoulders and move on, where, someone that you went to school with just happens to be in the area. It's an area that's outside of Rennes-le-Château. I think Rennes-le-Château is a bit like a satellite dish. The centre it is fascinating, but what goes on around the outside is absolutely fascinating.
Absolutely.
Come and pay us a visit.
The same way. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to get there as soon as I can. You know that. And hopefully there'll be some other people coming over to see. We'd love to take you around the area because we just love it. Well, it looks like we're out of time, though, for today's show. But I want to thank you, Dr. Martin, for joining me. Listen, I'm just very proud of you. And if you don't want that title, I'll give you my title of college dropout, and you can,
just
and I'll
quickly,
take the doctor title.
My title's actually Dead, which is, it's an education qualification. So James Martin Dead, yes.
Dead. Yeah. Well, let's hope not. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. I hope you'll join us next week for another exciting edition of Night Vision, where we're going to have some good mysteries to explore. Take care, everybody. Stay safe. Please take care of yourselves and each other. Good night. Happy birthday, Timmy.